Hi, welcome to Ask Tim, the insurance technical podcast brought to you by iAvenue. I'm your host, Tim Dodge, and I'm coming to you today from the Where's Waldo Center here at iAvenue headquarters in beautiful downtown DeWitt, New York. You know, I want to talk to you today about a potentially serious coverage gap that exists in the standard ISO homeowners policy. When people buy a homeowner's insurance policy, when you sell them one, when they buy it, they think they're plunking down a few $100s for insurance premium, and they expect that if that place burns down, that they're going to get some insurance money for it. And what I want to talk to you about today is a situation where that might not happen even though the policy is in force. And it's not because of an exclusion or anything in the terms or conditions of the policy. Is actually written right into the definitions of the policy, and it's not something that certainly your insureds expect, and probably not something that you expect either. And what I want to talk about here is the issue of where you reside, where the insured resides. Now, if you go to the coverage definitions in the homeowner's policy, it says that the policy covers the dwelling and other structures on the residence premises shown in the declarations, and it also covers additional expenses resulting from loss of use of the residence premises, and that would include things like additional living expense, having to live in a hotel for a few weeks while your place is repaired, loss of rents of that part of the premises that you were renting out, and so on and so forth. Now, from there, you need to go and take a look at the definition of residence premises in the policy, because the coverage grant refers to that term, residence premises. So if you look at that, it says that the residence premises is the one family dwelling where you reside, and you means the named insured and that insured spouse. It can also mean the 2, 3, or 4 family dwelling where you reside in at least one of the units. That part of any other building where you reside, and any of these have to be shown in the policy declarations. So there's coverage on the dwelling and the other structures, and for a loss of use for the dwelling where you reside, the one family dwelling where you reside, or the multifamily dwelling where you reside in at least one of the units. The question is, when do you reside there? What happens if the family buys a new home and can't sell the existing home right away? This is something that's happened to millions of people over the last few years. So they have to close on the new house. They've got a commitment on it. They've got a contract on it. So they move out of the first house and then they move into the new house. What happens to the coverage on the first house if they no longer reside there? What happens if grandma checks into a hospital or a nursing home and the doctors, the family consults with the doctors and it's determined that grandma just cannot live on her own anymore? She's going to have to stay in the hospital or the nursing home for the rest of her life. What happens to the coverage on her house? She's now residing in a nursing home. She doesn't reside in that home. What happens to the coverage on that house? And finally, what happens if a family closes on a new home but doesn't move in right away? Maybe they're having some work done on it. Maybe the previous owners are still living there for some period of time. Does the new family reside in that house if they're not actually moved in yet? Even though they bought an insurance policy on that house, they had to in order to close on the property. Do they have coverage on that? And this is a major question, because according to some interpretations, and to some courts, interpretations by insurance companies and courts where this has been litigated, the answer is no coverage. Coverage ceases immediately when the decision is made to leave that home and no longer return. If on Friday night at 10:30, the doctors and the family tell grandma, you can't go home again, you're just not medically capable of living on your own anymore. At 10:30 on Friday night, that coverage ceases on the house. You lose coverage on the house, the other structures, and for any loss of use. If you move out of the house because you bought another one, when that moving truck pulls out of the driveway, you no longer reside there. In the opinion of some companies and some courts, there is no longer any coverage on that house. It ceases immediately without notice. Now, the courts are divided on this. 3 courts in Texas have ruled no coverage since 1970. In the last 20 years, courts in Maryland, Arkansas, Georgia, Michigan, and Maine have come to the same conclusion. On the flip side, there's actually a New York court decision dating back to 1849 1849, I should say, that found that there is coverage. Now, that's a very old opinion, and of course the law has changed a lot since then. There's been more court decisions, there have been changes to statutes, and certainly to policy forms since then. But there's an 1849 New York court precedent. There are also precedents in Oregon, Illinois, and Georgia courts in the last 20 years that have found coverage. It's kind of interesting that different Georgia courts have ruled different ways on the same question in the last 20 years, and I don't have the details of those cases, so I don't know how they differed. But you can see that there is some division on this. The question that you got to be thinking about, though, as an insurance producer, is what do I tell my insureds here? Do you want to gamble that the insurance company is going to say, yeah, you're covered anyway, even though you moved out? Or do you want to take the chance that a court will rule in your insured's favor? Do you want to take the chance that your insured's going to be able to afford a lawyer to take this thing to court? What's really advisable is if your insured's residency circumstances change, that insured needs a dwelling policy as soon as possible. The dwelling policy does not have that where you reside language in it. It's different from the homeowners form. You need to get a dwelling policy covering that home just as soon as possible. This, of course, is contingent on your insured's telling you that their circumstances have changed. But if you become aware of it, that's really what you need to do. This applies to situations where the family has relocated, homes owned by trusts or limited liability companies, situations where the children have become the sole occupants of the parents' homes, foreclosure situations, anything like that. For more information on this, Big I Virtual University has done a tremendous amount of work on this issue. It's something they continue to press with state regulators and with the media about this subject. And so you want to go to the Virtual University website and look for the link that says where you reside. You will find a very good white paper discussing this issue. If you need to get in touch with me, you can find me by email at tdodge@iabney.org. You can reach me by phone at 800-851-8853, extension 229. I'm on AOL Instant Messenger as tdog4494. I'm on Twitter as Ask Tim. You can send me questions that way. You can send me a fax at 888-432-0510. And sometimes folks will drop by the iAbney offices with questions, and I'm open to that. Thanks for watching this episode of Ask Tim. We'll be back with a new one in a few weeks, and until then, if you want to know where you reside and you're not sure, don't forget to Ask Tim.